Hello friends, my name is Javid. Welcome to my show. Today I'm going to review the first year of the Taliban's rule in Afghanistan. Today we are witnessing the completion of 365 days of the Taliban's rule since August 15 last year, and a year passed since power was handed over to the Taliban, and let's take a look at what happened in the last 365 days. If you have followed the news on Afghanistan on and off, you might understand what I'm talking about, but if you haven't, please watch this video till the end to get informed. First and foremost, allow me to express my condolences to the people of Afghanistan and Khorasan for going through this nightmare called the Taliban for the second time. I express my deep condolences also to Tajik families in Panjshir and Darabs and northern Kabul plains who are subject to the cruelest treatment by the Taliban, which I believe simply qualify as war crimes or even genocide in particular. I equally extend my condolences to the victims of suicide attacks on Tajiks and Hazara mosques in the last several months. Last year, in August 2021, the power was handed over to the Taliban by the previous corrupt government led by an ethno-fascist and sociopath Ashraf Ghani. For Ashraf Ghani, transferring power from a Pashtun diaspora-led government to the Pashtun tribal and radical Islamic group like the Taliban made more sense and was right than letting it fall into the hands of Tajiks, who are a group which competes for power with the Pashtun minority in Afghanistan. You guessed it right, it's all about power politics. So what exactly the Taliban did in the last 365 days? Here I'm going to highlight a couple of things and a couple of events or a couple of incidents which took place in the last 365 days. Beginning with the Taliban's takeover of Kabul, they were concerned about the Panjshir Valley because the Panjshir Valley has a story. In 1996, when the Taliban took over Kabul, they couldn't even touch Panjshir, and the leader of resistance movement back then, Commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, successfully rallied people against the Taliban and continued to resist against the Taliban for till the last day of the Taliban's rule in Afghanistan in 2001. So having experienced that difficulty with the previous resistance movement, the Taliban prioritized putting an end to this Panjshir resistance before anything else. So they tried to mobilize their entire tribal forces from Afghanistan and also from the tribal belt of Pakistan, and including the terrorist groups which are working with the Taliban, and including Daesh and Al-Qaeda, and rallied all of them in big numbers. Some would say more than 10,000 fighters against a city which may not be populated more than 100,000 people. So basically the city was attacked for a month, and there was also a kind of humanitarian crisis in Panjshir at that time, because the Taliban cut down electricity and also the food supply and humanitarian aid supply to Panjshir in order to push the resistance to surrender. Before the end of the first month of the Taliban's rule, Panjshir fell into the hands of the Taliban, and the Taliban started, not just then, but also before the fall of Panjshir, they started arresting Tajiks in Kabul, in northern Afghanistan, and for accusing them of supporting their resistance or being connected with the previous military or police or intelligence department. So basically, Tajiks have gone through the toughest of their time, not just in 1930s when Nader Shah took power after he succeeded in rallying the tribal forces of the India at that time to take over power once again from the Tajik-led government by Amir Habibullah Kalakoni. And then in 1996, of course, they committed a lot of war crimes and genocide in the Northern Valley. But this time again, they repeated the history. They tried to target civilians for sympathizing with the resistance, or being a Panjshiri is now considered to be a crime under the Taliban. And so now, even since 11 months of their rule in Panjshir and Andarab, they do not officially live in peace with for a moment, because the resistance is successful in challenging their rule in those provinces, and still we are witnessing the strong presence of the resistance movement in Panjshir and Andarab, which is three districts in Baghlan province. Having said that, resistance continues, and the leader of the national resistance movement, Ahmad Massoud, told in an interview that he has rallied 3,000 forces now, which actively fights against the Taliban in Panjshir and Darabs and other provinces. The second thing which happened last year is the shutting down of girls' school. As you may know, if you're familiar with this region, Pashtuns in Afghanistan and Pakistan, they have some sort of enmity, and clear enmity towards girls' education. The clear example is Malala Yousafzai, now living in British in United Kingdom. Was shot at head by Pashtun militia in Pakistan. So basically, what they want is that no girl should go to school, and now they are trying to impose this culture on non-Pashtuns and Persianized Pashtuns or urbanized Pashtuns of Afghanistan as well. And this is a nightmare, actually. Women came out in big numbers in Kabul and Herat, mostly Tajik-led cities, and also in some Hazara districts as well, that they want girls' education to continue. Despite their call for international help, they were kind of ignored by the international media, and the Taliban were allowed to get away with shutting down schools against international norms and against the 21st century values that basic education for girls is a must, and not just basic but also equal rights of women should not be subject to negotiation in 21st century. But they got carried away with all their crimes committed in Panjshir and Andarabs, and also by preventing women from education. And not just that, and they also put an end to the mixed education system in universities, asking girls to come on odd days and boys on even days. So girls and boys do not meet each other in Afghanistan anymore officially in education institutions. It looks like Afghanistan is going back to a couple of centuries ago when things were pretty much worse. The third thing which happened last year is actually very shocking. Came to us as very shocking, is that the number of Pashtun members of the previous government coming in support of the Taliban regime. In the last 365 days, we saw very famous members of the Karzai and Ashraf Ghani's government coming back to Kabul, expressing their support for the Taliban and their willingness to work with the Taliban. I can name a couple of them so that you may get familiar. And there was a huge debate in media in the last 15 years about the fifth column, the people who are traitors and committing acts of treason against the previous governments and siding with the Taliban, but the previous governments never announced their names. kept them as a secret. But in last year was quite a discovery for us, that we realized that so many members of the previous governments were already aligned with the Taliban, and they kept their high-ranking positions in the previous governments. Beginning with Farooq Wardak, Minister of Education, and later Minister of Parliamentary Affairs in Karzai's government, Asif Nag, Minister of Education under Ashraf Ghani, Idris Zaman, Deputy Foreign Minister under Ashraf Ghani, Zarifa Ghafari, female mayor of Wardak province under Ashraf Ghani, Habiba Sarraj, nephew of King Amanullah and women activist and far-right Pashtunist, Hosni Mubarak Azizi, caretaker Minister of Transport and Aviation, Siddiq Chakari, corrupt minister under Hamid Karzai, and also a French citizen, Hashmat Ghani Ahmadzai, brother of former President Ashraf Ghani, and some ethno-fascists and corrupt faces from the well-known faces from the last 20 years, like Ismail Yoon, Muslim Yar, chairperson of the Congress, or the House of Elders, which is the second branch of the parliament. Abdullah, the chief executive, and Karzai remained in Kabul, trying to find their ways to work with the Taliban. Especially the case of Abdullah is very interesting, because in the last resistance movement, he was a spokesperson to the commander of Commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, the leader of the national resistance movement. But this time he kept mum. He didn't support the resistance movement and remained under the Taliban rule. So he might be considered as one of the fifth column members. Another issue is the presence of Ashraf Ghani in media. In last year, Ashraf Ghani tried to give several interviews to leading newspapers, trying to clarify certain things on his part, which came out only as a surprise to us, that he did not even once apologize on his behalf, on failing the country, failing the nation, escaping the country, stealing millions of dollars, converted into bitcoins and deposited in secret bank accounts of so many countries. Basically, he's trying to play the Pashtun card to get away with all the accusations, and whenever he's asked a question about anything, he simply counter-accuses the person, and without getting into answering all those replying to accusations. So the worst part is that the anti-Ashraf Ghani politicians and groups failed to bring him into to justice and hold him accountable, or hold his group accountable. So once realizing how weak his opponents are, they became so courageous in coming out and taking this opportunity to to shape public opinion about his escape and about his treason. Last year was also a very bad year, considering the humanitarian crisis created after the fall of the previous regime. The Taliban's return also meant that the banks were shut down, embassies were shut down, and thousands of citizens lost their jobs, and businesses left the country. Those continued to work with the government, did not receive their salaries for months. People were starving for food, for medical aid, and it was a nightmare for the entire nation. And international aid, which was promised to be channeled through the Taliban, were often channeled to Taliban supporters, and areas like especially northern Afghanistan, where usually the sympathies are with the resistance movement, were partially ignored, or the government tried to, or the Taliban government tried to not share those humanitarian aids and with them. The political crisis created after the fall of the previous regime is also something that we should discuss, because neither the Taliban was recognized nor the resistance movement declared a government in exile, and failed to do so. And as a result, we don't have any government recognized by international community. We don't have embassies in Afghanistan, and actually it is running based on a de facto pragmatic contact between the government of the Taliban group and the international community, who are concerned about the humanitarian and political crisis and its consequences for women and also for the for citizens of that country. So international flights are not happening, regular flights are not happening to Kabul. It's just a flight from Kabul to Pakistan on daily or in every other day they are happening between Kabul and Islamabad. And that also they are charging an incredible amount for passengers. A big number of educated citizens of Afghanistan were displaced or evacuated by international forces. Some of them immigrated to neighboring countries like Iran and Pakistan and India. It was a total disastrous year for the entire country. The worst part of the last year was the role played by media and to whitewash the Taliban. Big media platforms, you name it, run the Taliban 2.0 propaganda, sending some journalists to Kabul to click pictures with Taliban fighters and people to normalize and to depict the situation as normal. It hurt us deeply, and it hurt the nation deeply, and they kind of ignored the crimes committed by the Taliban, and they ignored the women's voices to open school for girls, considering them as a minority. Some media outlets simply considered it as a no priority issue. So basically, we're witnessing 1 year loss for girls of Afghanistan, Khorasan. But it was also a bad year for interethnic relations in Afghanistan, because the Pashtuns either supported the Taliban or kept silence on the crimes committed by the Taliban against Tajiks, and this had consequences for interethnic relations, and making it even worse, that they even person-to-person relationships on social media or on community level has become really worse, and people think that if we go by this Benedict Anderson's idea of imagined community, one can clearly say that you can hardly imagine united Afghanistan anymore, because the Pashtuns imagine a different country now, and Tajiks different, and probably the non-Pashtuns imagine a different country. And coming to the most favorite question, which I always get asked, is what is the solution? I think realistically we cannot imagine Afghanistan to come out as a united country in the future. I think partition into Khorasan and Afghanistan might be a solution. Khorasan representing the non-Pashtuns and including urbanized and Persianized Pashtuns, but the Afghanistan should then remain in the belt, representing the Taliban and other tribal sects of the Taliban government, and the Pashtun and majority cities in the east and south. So all in all, if I review the entire in one sentence, it was tough for us as a member of the Afghanistani Khorasani diaspora in Europe. it was also difficult seeing our families suffer in Afghanistan, and seeing how people were tortured by the Taliban. Their pictures are showing up in social media, and seeing how Taliban were like promoting this target killing of ex-militant member of the previous government, and it was nightmare. It was difficult for all of us, and I don't know if there is a call for unity needed anymore. I think once the only hope that people have at the moment is that if the resistance movement succeeds to free some cities from the Taliban, they might consider composing another government in competition to the Taliban in the territory of Afghanistan, or might consider declaring another government or another state, or go for separation. Even Ashraf Ghani recognized that there is a tendency among ethnic groups to claim independence from the Taliban.